Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're into world history, power, and the real reasons empires rise and fall, you're in the right place. Today, we're breaking down the real reason Vikings were so successful. And no, it wasn't just violence. We're going to uncover the strategy, psychology, and systems that allowed a small group from Scandinavia to dominate Europe for centuries, and what that teaches us today. Let's get into it. Let me ask you something slightly uncomfortable. Have you ever blamed your lack of results on not being aggressive enough? Like you look at successful people, companies, countries and think they're just more ruthless. That's why they win. Here's the thing. That's exactly what people think about the Vikings. Big axes, burning villages, pure violence. End of story. But look, if violence alone created long-term success, every random warlord in history would have built a global brand that lasted 300 years. They didn't. So why did a relatively small population from cold, resource-poor Scandinavia dominate trade routes from North America to the Middle East between the 8th and 11th centuries? Why did monks in England literally write prayers asking God to save them from these guys? And why did Viking influence stretch from modern-day Canada to Baghdad? It wasn't just brutality. That's the lazy explanation, and lazy explanations usually hide the real advantage. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Vikings were successful because they understood leverage before anyone else did, and most people today still don't. First, let's kill the biggest myth. Vikings were not just chaotic raiders running around screaming. Yes, they raided. The attack on Lindisfarne in 793 shocked Christian Europe and is often marked as the beginning of the Viking Age. But raiding was just their marketing department. It was loud, it was dramatic. It made headlines, well, medieval headlines. But the real engine of Viking success was trade, logistics, and adaptability. Archaeological finds show Viking coins from the Abbasid Caliphate, meaning they were trading deep into the Islamic world. Thousands of silver dirhams have been found in Scandinavia. Think about that. These guys from icy fjords were plugged into a global trade network stretching thousands of kilometers. Violence didn't build that network. Trust, roots, ships, and strategy did. Now imagine you live in Norway in the year 850. Your soil is poor. Growing seasons are short. You have limited resources. You have two choices. Fight your neighbors for scraps, or get on a ship and create opportunity elsewhere. Scarcity created innovation. And this is where it gets interesting. The Vikings didn't just build ships. They built the best ships in the world at that time. The longship was a masterpiece of engineering, flexible hull, shallow draft. It could sail open ocean and navigate rivers. That's like having a modern vehicle that works as a sports car and a submarine at the same time. While most European ships were heavy and slow, Viking longships could travel up rivers, strike quickly, and leave before organized resistance even formed. Speed was their asymmetric advantage. Here's a stat that should wake you up. By the 9th century, Viking raids had reached as far as Seville in Spain and even into the Mediterranean. This wasn't random chaos. That's strategic mobility. They were playing offense while everyone else was defending static positions, and static players lose. But here's where most people misunderstand them. Vikings didn't just destroy societies, they integrated into them. In England, they didn't just raid, they settled. The Danelaw became a large part of England under Viking control. In France, the Viking leader Rollo was granted land by the Frankish king in 911, which became Normandy. Yes, Normandy. The same Normandy that later conquered England in 1066 under William the Conqueror. That's generational strategy. They pivoted from raiders to rulers, from outsiders to insiders, from chaos to structure. That's not mindless violence, that's adaptability. And adaptability beats strength almost every time. There's a psychological layer here that people ignore. Vikings built a culture around honor, reputation, and storytelling. Skalds, poets, preserved their deeds. Your name outlived your body. That belief system incentivized bold action. If you think about it, they hacked human psychology. They created a narrative where risk-taking was rewarded socially and spiritually. Compare that to societies where hierarchy was rigid and mobility was limited. If you're a young man in 9th century Scandinavia, with ambition, the Viking world offered upside. Massive upside. New land in Iceland, wealth in England, trade in Byzantium, even service in the Varangian Guard, protecting the Byzantine emperor. Vikings weren't just raiders, some became elite mercenaries in Constantinople. That's insane when you think about it, from remote Scandinavia to the most powerful court in Eastern Europe. That's networking at an imperial level. And here's another myth. Vikings were disorganized barbarians. Actually, their assemblies, called things, were early forms of participatory governance. Disputes were settled in public gatherings. Laws were memorized and recited. Iceland's Althing, founded in 930, is considered one of the oldest parliamentary institutions in the world. Let that sink in. The so-called savages were building political systems that valued consensus and law. Violence was part of their toolkit, but it wasn't the system. The system was mobility plus trade plus governance plus culture. Violence was just the entry point. So why were they so feared? Because they understood timing. They struck when Europe was fragmented. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, power was decentralized. Small kingdoms, weak coordination, monasteries full of wealth, but poorly defended. Vikings targeted high-value, low-security assets. That's not random brutality. That's opportunity recognition. In modern terms, they were scanning for inefficiencies, and they exploited them. Now, here's the surprising reveal. The Viking Age ended not because they became weaker, but because Europe adapted. Kingdoms centralized, defenses improved, trade networks normalized. Christianity spread through Scandinavia, integrating them into the same religious framework as the rest of Europe. The edge disappeared. Once everyone learned the game, the advantage shrank. That's the pattern of every dominant force in history. Early advantage, rapid expansion, imitation by competitors, loss of uniqueness. So what can you actually learn from this beyond cool helmets and Netflix shows? First, scarcity is not your enemy. It's your pressure chamber. Scandinavia's harsh environment forced innovation. If you feel limited, good. Constraints force creativity. Second, mobility matters. The Vikings didn't wait for opportunity to come to them. They built the infrastructure, ships, routes, alliances, to go find it. In modern terms, that's skills and networks. Third, reputation compounds. They were terrifying, yes, but also respected traders and reliable mercenaries. Your brand travels faster than you do. Protect it. Fourth, adapt or disappear. Raiders became settlers. Pagans became Christians. Outsiders became rulers. If your identity is rigid, you break when the environment changes. The Vikings survived by evolving. And here's the deeper psychological lesson. Most people think success requires overwhelming force, more hours, more aggression, more intensity. But the Vikings show that leverage beats force. A faster ship beats a bigger army. A flexible mindset beats a rigid empire. A strong narrative beats silent competence. So when you hear the real reason Vikings were so successful, don't default to violence. Violence was the surface. Underneath was engineering, trade, governance, culture, timing, and psychological design. That's why their influence shaped England, Ireland, France, Russia, and even parts of the Mediterranean. That's why their DNA still runs through modern Europe. That's why their legacy lasted centuries. And here's where I get slightly frustrated. People love romanticizing brute strength because it excuses them from building systems. It's easier to say they were just savage than to admit they outthought and outmoved their competition. So ask yourself, are you trying to win through force or through leverage? Are you attacking randomly or identifying weak points in the system? Are you clinging to identity or adapting when the environment shifts? History isn't just stories, it's patterns. And the Viking pattern is clear. Build mobility, exploit timing, craft culture, and evolve before you're forced to. You don't need an axe, you need strategy. So the next time you think success comes down to aggression, remember a group of farmers from the edge of Europe who rewired an entire continent, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the smartest movers in the room. And if you can learn that lesson now, instead of after your own empire collapses, you're already ahead. And that's the real reason the Vikings were so successful. Not just axes, not just raids, but strategy, leverage, and adaptation. If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more videos that explain history in a simple, powerful way, make sure you subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me which empire we should break down next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.